Well, with all the animosity and anger that I've been able to muster, let's go ahead and talk about speeding tickets. And I know we all hate them. I know I don't like them, but I wrote plenty of them. So let's go ahead and give an idea. Let me explain to you how that particular process works. Now, I'm most familiar with California, and that's because that's where I was a motor cop for a very long time, wrote a lot of tickets. But as far as speeding goes, you've seen a lot of videos out there, people fighting the law, telling them they're not going to give them ID. And I've covered that in other videos, kind of what to consider. And I'll just parlay into that. You might want to consider what's going to happen with your car when eventually they get you out of it. And I know you're going to stand your ground, you're going to stick in there a little deeper than an Alabama tick, but at some point they're going to extract you from the vehicle. Most likely. It depends on the agency, the supervisors, and all of this sort of thing, but that's just something to know. So about speeding, how does that work? How does it work? All right. So what happens is this. There's a few different ways. A lot of people are under the presumption that a police officer can't hide, and that's not true. They can hide anywhere they want. I know some very clever people have cut holes in hedges to be able to shoot radar and laser through at approaching vehicles. The thing with laser and radar tickets is those devices have to have a certain standard. They have to be calibrated. They have to be looked at. And you, as a potential speeder, a law violator in that regard, you have a right to see if, in fact, that the department and the officer is living up to that standard. You can request documentation on those devices, and if it's unable to be provided to you, then that case more than likely is going to be dismissed. I'm not a lawyer. This isn't legal advice. This is just what I know, having been to court many, many times, having watched people defend themselves. And let me tell you this, I'm not upset when people win their case. I'm very happy when I used to go to court and people would actually win and they became prepared. They had drawings and pictures. They showed where potentially I was, where they were, and they were able to impress upon the court that in fact there is no way that they could have been the one violating the speed law, the stop sign, the stoplight, these sorts of things. And that's good. Of course, none of us have the time. We would much rather not get the ticket in the first place, but you got it, so here we are. So let's talk a little bit about speeding. Most of the tickets that are written here in Southern California and in California in general are going to be unsafe speed tickets. And you might ask, well, why is that different than a speeding ticket? Because there's a ticket that talks about exceeding a state maximum. And that burden of proof is only the officer having to provide that you were actually going faster than what was posted on the sign. Usually that has to do with state maximums, a 55, 65, I think California has some 70. As we head up to San Francisco, I think I've seen 70 and so on. So you go 1 mile and over any of those types of postings on a state highway, if memory serves, don't quote me, well, quote me, but it is not going to matter. But if you're going 1 mile an hour above that, the officer just has to say that you were in fact going 1 mile an hour above that, and that's really it. Most of the other tickets that you're going to get, and this is a majority, are going to be unsafe speed. So the officer now has to say what you were doing was unsafe. What's interesting about that 22350 of the California Vehicle Code, unsafe speed, is the fact that you can in fact be going less than the speed limit and still get a ticket for unsafe speed, because maybe that particular speed was unsafe for the conditions. Think of it this way, it's raining outside, it's near dusk, maybe the sun is coming in your window at a particular angle, maybe the roads are wet or muddy, maybe that particular speed happens to be unsafe. Maybe you were doing something in a car that had your attention, maybe you have a dog running around in there, maybe you're putting on makeup, maybe you're trying to get your vape set up or whatever it may be, whatever your driving habits happen to be, shaving, there's a lot of stuff. Maybe 35 miles an hour in a 35 miles an hour zone while you're shaving your face is unsafe speed. You get the point. So radar and laser, what are those? Well, radar and laser are to be used as supportive evidence. So while you can ask the officer to bring to court with them documents that show that the devices are calibrated properly, you can ask the officer what he did to prepare that device for that particular day, when he did it. These are all little tricks and tips that we get into more and more on Ticket Whisperer and these different locations that I publicize this content. But having said that, there's supportive evidence. So basically, they're used to back up what the cop already knows. Well, how does he know how fast you're going? Because he has become an expert in speed estimation. How do they do that? Well, they send us out and they have somebody that's got a radar or a laser, and then the person with the radar or laser calls out the vehicles on approach, and it's up to us to estimate their speed, and everything's logged down and cataloged. We do that vehicles coming, vehicles going, somewhere about 100 cars, or you can make that adjustment, but 100 was easy. And then from there, you get a particular percentage or miles per hour error. And if the police officer is more than 5 miles an hour off, that's a problem. But again, they need to do it again. Or in some cases, maybe they didn't even get certified because they were just horrible at that whole thing of speed estimation. So the first thing that does, the cop estimates your speed. Then he activates the device to get supportive evidence. And that's typically, that goes on the citation. So one of the questions if you want to fight that type of ticket, first off is whatever your speed was, what was unsafe. Now let me play you back some historical rules that I had with myself. 15 miles an hour over posted in most locations. If there weren't any of these other elements that might have made going less than that particular posted speed unsafe, I would say 15 miles an hour over, at least my standard, that was good enough to cover just about anything. And then with that, part of the things that made these particular stretches of roadway unsafe may be the high incidence of speed-related death-type crashes or K-traffics, where people actually were killed as a result of speeding, as that being the cause of the collisions. That does carry with it a certain weight when the cop goes to court and says, well, I was working one of the top 20 streets in the San Fernando Valley. And then the judge would then maybe ask, what is that, if they're not privy to it, or maybe the cop would explain to the court that's because there's been so many collisions on that street, speed related. There are major problems because so many people drive fast, so hence that's why I'm out there enforcing this unsafe speed law. So these are some of the reasons to post. Also, other reasons, you have shopping centers, you have people exiting driveways, you have people with strollers, parents, joggers, runners, walkers, kids going to school, whatever it may be in that area. And also time of day, if there's heavy traffic, if it's light traffic, if it's during hours of darkness or dusk or in the middle of the night or whatever it may be. These are all other reasons that a judge could look at the citation and say, wow, that was definitely unsafe, and then ask you, do you have anything to say about that? What you can say about that. What was unsafe, officer, is maybe a good place to start, but you don't want to get too deep into it because then they're going to throw a lot of stuff out there. I would come back up a little bit and find out if in fact they have the right credentials with them in court to be able to show to you, because you don't have to submit with what they're saying, the court can, but you can ask, could you show me this document or this test where it shows you plus or minus so many miles an hour of accuracy in speed estimation? I'd really like to see it. And maybe if they don't have it with them, maybe that's enough for the court to deem that you'll be held not guilty because the officer failed to provide adequate justification to their training and experience with regard to speeding. The other things you want to go after, of course, is the device itself, radar, laser. Now, if they're pacing you, that's going to fall back on their ability to estimate speed and the vehicle's calibration for the speedometer. That's something else that they should have with them, a card that corresponds to the vehicle. At least the bigger agencies do. I know we at LAPD did when I was on a motorcycle. We have the same calibration card for the police motorcycles. It shows that at 50 miles an hour on the speedometer on the Kawasaki or Harley Davidson or now BMW police motorcycles, it's either dead on or it's going to be plus or minus so many miles an hour. That is then calculated into the estimation. Then the bumper pace that's established, and then that's put on the citation, so the court is made aware of it. Some of the best things you can do for yourself is, of course, when you get pulled over. I do this on another video, not talking about speeding, but all the other violations in general. When they say, do you know why I stopped you today? Well, no, officer, I don't. if you were speeding and they pulled you over, and this is only for those people that are not guilty. For the guilty folks out there, you guys do what you do. The videos I make are for people that really don't believe they were doing what the cops said. That's kind of important, and you have a right to go fight that because that's based on the Constitution. You can go confront those people against you, and you get to do that in court. So when you get pulled over out there, if you're one of the people that wants to fight the reason why you were pulled over, fight not wanting to give up your identification and all this other stuff, that's an ugly road to go. But hey, you have at it, you do all of that. It's a lot easier when the police officer really doesn't have much more information about you. And when the time we stopped people, we started gathering evidence. And the more of a prick they were, the easier it was to remember because there's notes that are taken either on the back of the citation, which you'll want to, you can ask for that in court. You say, officer, did you make any other notes about me and my conduct? Do you have anything else that you can share with me in disclosure purposes so I can see and have a right to understand them? And usually they're going to say no, but in some cases, maybe they'll say yes. And sometimes, rarely, they'll draw a circle with a dot in the center of it. That means that, well, you were an asshole. And if that's out in court, that's usually a bad thing for the cop and good for you. A lot of times that stuff is actually dismissed depending on the judge or the pro tem, whoever's sitting on the stand. Now, with regard to speeding, you're more than likely going to get heard by a traffic judge or a regular judge. If there's a pro tem in there, which is an attorney that's playing judge, maybe they have a future of wanting to be a judge, but it's just something they do. Whenever a person requests to change from them to a real judge, a lot of times that's frowned on. I know attorneys try it, and a lot of times they walk out of court losing. It's just one of those things. I can't prove it. It's just been something that I've kind of noticed because we run into these people later. And if they have a regular pro tem on the stand, there's a lot better chance with them, it seems like, for the normal Joe and Jane that gets written a ticket than it is with trying to switch courts because you have something to prove and you're trying to go have a real judge listen to your case. The real judge might even be more critical because the real judge is doing something else, not wanting to be called in to hear a traffic case when there's actually a pro tem handling all of that. Can't prove it, just something to plug into your brain when you get into court. Now, one of the other things with regard to speeding is that 15-mile-an-hour rule I had. It usually encompassed everything, so people got that. So when you were in a 35-mile-an-hour zone, if I was shooting radar or laser on the police motorcycle, and they do this from cars too, so don't think that only motorcycle cops can pull you over. Oh, and then they have radar going to you, coming away from you, laser units to do that same thing. So if you're coming this way, the cop's actually moving, driving the opposite direction, they can lock in your speed. And they don't even have to lock in your speed, but they can record your speed after they estimate it. I know some of the people think, well, I want to see the radar, I want to see the laser in regard to speeding, and the cop doesn't have to show you. I liked to have it locked, and I like to be able to show the person if they wanted to see it. But it's always the same. You show it to them, they say, well, that wasn't me. How do you know that was me? And then you get into more talk. So, and a lot of times we were just out there trying to do our job, so the talk took a lot of time. And back in the day, this quota thing, well, there were some police officers that sued to fight the quota, and they got rid of it. So that was something back in the day. Now, I don't know about other agencies, but there was a big lawsuit with the city of LA, and that stopped. So if you're getting written a ticket there in LA, it's not because they have to write so many. It's because they actually believe in their mission. And that mission is trying to save lives through the 3 E's of traffic, which are engineering, enforcement, and education. And enforcement, if you get in a ticket, education could be speaking at community groups and events. And maybe the other 15 bazillion people that drive by you seeing you get that ticket, they're now being educated that a cop's out there. And finally, engineering. So let's talk about engineering, that aspect when it comes to radar and laser citations and speeding citations. To use a radar and laser, at least in the city of LA, they had to have a street that had an engineering survey completed on it. It's going to show a lot of information. That's something else you're privy to. It's going to show that they didn't get this massively wide street that's really capable of 50 miles an hour in a safe way and post it at 10 miles an hour just to screw with people and write tickets. So the engineering report is going to validate that particular posted speed, and it's also going to validate the officer that's out there in the way that they're enforcing that unsafe speed law, or 22.350 of the vehicle code. So you'll be privy to that as well. And when I talk to people further in a consultation type basis. All of that is explained. First, we want to find out how the citation was written, who wrote it, if there's any holes in it as far as the way that it was put together, what are all the meanings of the different characters on the citation itself, and then looking at certifications for the devices and these sorts of things. Then the police officer certification. But I'll tell you this, when a cop is dialed in and knows exactly what they're doing, really looks at their craft as being incredibly serious, it's difficult to win. It's really not about having to win overall. It's about a preponderance of evidence. It's about the judge having some kind of reasonable doubt. And if you're watching this video and you're watching it about speeding and you know that you have a ticket, or you just want to prepare yourself for the future and you don't feel like you were the one speeding, then absolutely feel free to fight that in court. And there's ways to do it in the best way possible where you don't appear all of a sudden. You might be able to change your venue. You might be able to get a continuance if it's inconvenient for you to appear. And a lot of times, the longer it goes from citation date to court appearance, sometimes the officers get foggy. Most of them remember quite well, and even now with the new data capture, they have the video cameras, they have a lot of other things that are active that they can review prior to going into court. A lot of them have that, some of them don't. That's kind of good to know before going in, because if you say you didn't do something and they bring in the videotape of you doing it, sorry, I wasted my time thing. But prepare and find out what you're going to be fighting. If you really feel like you didn't do what they said, maybe it was another vehicle that looked like yours. I do know that I've stopped people, and some of the things I've heard in court are really fantastically could have been correct, where they're saying that, it's funny, I bought this car a few months ago, and you know how when you buy a car, you have a lot of other, you finally start seeing that car everywhere, and you never really saw it before till you bought it, and all of a sudden it's everywhere around you. In this day, when I was driving down this particular stretch of roadway before Officer McIver pulled me over, I remember thinking to myself, boy, that's a car just like mine, and boy, is he hauling ass. But anyway, I didn't think much of it. Next thing I know, I got pulled over. I don't think I was speeding, but anyway, this guy blew by me. I was standing still. But anyway, cop pulled me over. I didn't really have anything to say. I didn't tell him whether I did it or not. I'm sure I wasn't speeding, so I'm sure I said that. Because people often do that as well. They'll say, well, how fast were you going? If it's a 35-mile-an-hour zone, could you have been doing 36? And if you say yes to that, then of course you could have been going even faster than that, right? So these are other things to think about. If you drive around the city of Los Angeles, never under any circumstances violating the speed, then you have nothing to worry about. But if on this particular day you could have been going 40 and the cop said you were going 50, it's a little tough to disprove that maybe you weren't going 50. Just food for thought. But if you really feel like you didn't do it, you really feel like you weren't the person that violated what you're getting stopped for, then albeit there's ways to approach it and stand up and fight it. One of the things that I used to see in court all the time, and again, I'm not an attorney, but a lot of times the attorneys would show up without the person on their behalf, and they would just plead out immediately to traffic school. I can't remember in all of that time actually watching an attorney fight the citation. So you're paying them hundreds of dollars to do something that you could do by going to court and seeing if the cop shows up and saying, yes, I'll take traffic school. Now, because I never had the experience, doesn't mean it doesn't happen. Just because I've never met any fantastically versed attorneys that protect people with regard to vehicle code, that doesn't mean they don't exist. But from what I saw in court, and I was in court quite a bit, because when you're doing 20 tickets a day and you got over 15 years, somewhere in the neighborhood of 60,000 or greater citations written, and having been to court a lot, testifying a lot of the time, because people, when they go to court, when they find out the cop's there, because the cop was subpoenaed, we can't just ignore the subpoena, that's a criminal issue. Well, it comes down to the department issue disciplining, and that's days off or worse. And if you keep doing it, then you'll get fired. And then the court can hold you accountable in contempt because you've ignored a subpoena from the court. So cops do go to court, but it's sometimes someplace happen. We crash, we get hurt, we get sick. There's a lot of things that happen that might prevent us from going to court. Thereby, in that particular circumstance, people would show up and then they would get found not guilty because the cop didn't show up. And we had a pro tem that was kind of cute. And he would always say, well, in court's here, you showed up, the cop isn't. What do you say we get them back? We make sure we subpoena them in future so you can fight them and uphold your right for justice. Or I can just dismiss it. And of course, they said just dismiss it. We'll see you in the next one.